And
I'm keeping
okay,
everything's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
we are live. So
Hi.
yeah, we can do this. Yes, okay. So anyway, we're gonna do a double screen here. I'm John Celestri. I'm the animator of Boba Fett from the Star Wars Holiday Special. And today I'm having coffee break with Darick Robertson, the co-creator of The Boys and co-executive producer of The Boys. Prime is it
Prime.
Amazon Prime. Okay,
it sounds a lot more important than it is.
So listen, thanks a lot, and I'm glad to have and talk with you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be on with you. It was just before we got rolling here, I was just praising you with all the influence on my childhood you had, and how come like a lot of my art career came from all the stuff you worked on. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm glad. I'm glad it was it was more than a paycheck.
Yeah.
And
honestly, I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in this. I think the Boba Fett portion of the Star Wars Holiday Special is the only thing you want to go back and watch.
Yes,
like that animated bit was probably the best part of the whole thing.
Well, I watched the only broadcast of it, live, and I was really worried that nobody would stay tuned for the midpoint to see the cartoon.
It was Star Wars. We all watched it. I remember watching it live when I was.
I know.
I'm like the biggest Star Wars nerd you got, and like you can't see it, but to the left of me, I'm just surrounded by Star Wars figures.
Yes. Okay. Well, okay. Well, We'll talk about how in and outs maybe. I mean, sometimes there's something I might have done that sparked something in your mind and whatnot when as your career went along. But what we'll do is how about how did you get into how did you get to the point where you broke in to the business?
Well, I'm a lifelong compulsive artist. I can't remember a time I didn't have a pen in my hand trying to make pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I've always loved drawing. I've always been attracted to animation and comics, and anything where you can tell a story with pictures has always intrigued me. I was a real big Disney and Peanuts fan when I was a little boy, and my mom and dad were both very encouraging. And the first thing I ever learned to draw was Snoopy and Tweety Bird. Like I was really drawn to that world, those worlds. And as I got older, Star Wars came along and blew my mind. Like you've heard of Star Wars. It's this
I heard
a film franchise that was big in the 70s.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, who knew?
I remember when it got old for people and like they weren't into it anymore. And I was like the only one running around like still loving on Star Wars in my, purveyance. And then it came back in a big way in the 90s. But from the time like Return of the Jedi ended until they brought the action figures back and re-released the special editions of the movies, like I met David Prowse and nobody was talking to him. I was at a convention and Darth Vader was sitting by himself at a table. And the only reason I went over to talk to him is because I saw he had this big 3-foot Darth Vader statue. And I thought maybe he was selling these. So I walked over to him and I was like, hey, and then I was looking at, he had a table full of photographs of himself, including him shirtless in Clockwork Orange, because he was the assistant in Clockwork Orange. And I went, wait, are you David Prowse? And he said, yes. And then we started talking. He couldn't have been a more friendly guy. And we talked for a while. And but I got to ask every Star Wars question I ever had and lament that they didn't let him like be the guy in the helmet, like
I know
off in Jedi, and he was a little salty about that too. So
yeah, well, you know how show business goes.
Oh, all too well.
It's amazing what you could put together for what's left on the cutting room floor.
Oh, I know. There's and God bless YouTube. Like, and I never would have imagined that in the future, where you can find just about anything you want to watch, including all the deleted scenes from Star Wars.
Right.
I always felt bad for the guy that played Biggs. Like because he had a whole scene that they just cut out of the opening because it slowed the pacing down too much. But he had a big moment where he was like in a civilian clothes with a cape, and he and Luke are talking, and talking about what the future is going to be, and then they don't see each other again until they're about to blow up the Death Star. But there's like a whole big section where Luke goes to Tashi Station and meets all of his friends, and they call him Wormy.
Mm.
And you can see that on YouTube. But for years, because it was in the comic book and it was never in the film, and I'm like, where are these scenes? And I'm amazed because they've never ended up on any of the official releases of the DVDs or anything.
Well, talk about a cutting room floor. I don't know if any of the quad hole sequences that got cut from Rock and Rule ever showed up anywhere. So
I'd love to see those.
I mean,
so much.
It was gone. I mean, I think it was about a full half minute. It just cut, done.
Ouch! That's a lot of work. A half minute of animation.
Yeah,
that's hundreds, if not thousands, of drawings.
There's the thousands. Yeah, you're talking thousands. Yes, yeah. No, but that's what happens. That's what happens. Anyway, so you were a Star Wars fan,
huge Star Wars fan,
and drawing.
Yeah, and then sorry, I get off on tangents.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've always drawn, and then when I was about 10 years old, I discovered DC. The DC Comics universe, and really fell in love with the Flash. Like I was, it was just right after Star Wars, around the time Superman the movie came out, and that's when I started collecting comics and then realizing people got paid to draw them, and thought, hey, maybe I could get paid to draw comic books someday. And so I started working real hard on my chops, and I put together like I took typing paper and stapled it together, and then drew my own original comic with my own character. And I put the little price tags on it and created a company logo. And I really tried to make it look like a real comic book, which I didn't realize is a thing. It's like, that's like manifestation. You just want it so badly, you make it. And then the universe goes, okay, here you go. And then now I have, because I just was dreaming someday maybe I'd have a comic book with my name on it. Now I got too much. I can't keep I can't scroll. But but then that led me to and then like I said, I always compulsively drew. I drew 11 issues of these stapled together comics, wrote the stories, and I just did it for fun. And then I started filling up sketchbooks, and I stack of sketchbooks like this that I through from middle school through high school. And in my sketchbooks is a Rock and Rule drawing, which I was from 1983. And then again, and the only reason I knew about Rock and Rule is Marvel put out a super special, and this movie, and it's like, this is going to be a movie, and I just was waiting for the movie that never came. But I love that comic book, and I love the designs, and those designs influenced what would become my very first published work, which I created in summer school of 1985. Character called Space Beaver, which was just a joke for me. I was just kind of running with the name because I liked the name, and I was too innocent to know it was dirty or euphemistic. So I was just it was just a cartoon beaver with a laser pistols, and his best friend was a tortoise, and because tortoise and beavers, they hang out. And then but it was like an animal universe, because I loved Rocket Raccoon, and I loved Captain Carrot and the Amazing Zoo Crew at the time, and Ninja Turtles was starting to become a thing. And I only knew from the black and white comics at that point. They weren't a cartoon or a toy line yet. And but I was just having fun. I didn't really think it was going to get published until I met a guy who was an inker for a very small company. I think they were called Viz, and they put out a book called Shuriken. And my friend Michio Okamura, and he taught me how to draw. He really liked my work, and we became friends. And then he was saying, "Well, hey, my publisher will publish Space Beaver based on these pen and ink ballpoint pen drawings." He goes, but but he can't pay you, but he'll publish it. And I was like, I'm 16. I'm like, sure, I'm going to get published. Great. Cause here's my dream come true. I'm going to have that comic book with my name on it.
Right.
And I didn't know anything about, rights, payment. What are these things? I just put my name on it. So but he taught me how to do 11x17 Bristol board and professional materials, introduced me to Croco pens and brushes and the proper tools. And so I started drawing Space Beaver #1, and I was still in high school. And I went into, I would go regularly to a comic book store called Peninsula Comics, which is no longer there. and the owner is a gentleman named Tibor Sardi. And Tibor I was unaware that there was this black and white comic boom going on. There's been 3 major bubbles
Yep.
in comic books,
Yeah.
and this was one of the first of my experience. And by bubbles, I mean they burst.
It really exploded, yes.
Yeah, so the black and white comic boom was happening in the 1980s thanks to the Ninja Turtles, because everybody was looking for the next hot property. So anybody could hold a pen was putting out a crappy black and white #1, and stores were ordering them like crazy because they didn't want to miss the next Ninja Turtles. And so you had a lot of like, I don't want to name names because it can be, I don't want to hurt anyone.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot.
Space Beaver got caught up in the midst of this and was regarded as one of these disposable ones, even though I was 17 and putting my heart into it, but I didn't,
But you were getting your internship in.
Yeah, I mean, I was cutting my teeth.
Yeah,
it's my rookie years. So,
yeah, I know.
But I was writing, but I wrote and I drew 11 issues of it, and that are out there to be found. And and considering I was just coming out of high school, I don't think that's too bad. But the nice thing was it got me going to comic book conventions, and as a result, I met a lot of editors and for Marvel and DC, which was what my dream was, is I'm going to get into Marvel and DC. And, and because I was a guest at these shows, I had a lot more access to go up and see people on a regular basis. They'd remember me and I'd remember them. And sometimes they give me their card, say, send me your samples, see how your progress is going. They give me advice, and that advice was totally gold, especially Mike Carlin's. And after about 4 years of really taking any indie job I could get outside of Space Beaver and going to conventions and selling sketches to make a living, and putting samples together and staying in communication with the editors at Marvel and DC. It's not like that anymore because the convention.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Is it just in like 30 seconds? What is the difference between then and now?
Well, I mean, everybody's into comics in some level or another now, like in a way that, I was like a weird geek that liked comics and superheroes, and it was I was bullied and mocked quite a bit for all the things that make me interesting now. But at the time I was, like I'll never forget, just real quick, like 5th grade. And on that fulcrum of when you got to start kind of acting like a big kid and not a little kid. But I went out with my buddy, and we got to the yard, and up until this day, this was a perfectly normal question. Do you want to play superheroes? And we'd run around the yard pretending to be Batman or whatever. And there was the day, kind of like Puff the Magic Dragon. Like one day I walked out and said, hey, you want to play superheroes? And they go, he wants to play superheroes. And they all laughed at me. And I
know, you're
my friend,
but you had a superpower.
I just started playing superheroes in my mind. And
but you had a superpower, which was drawing.
Yeah, and I could also live in my imagination and take all that, and I just started putting it down on paper. That's where it all comes from. Start thinking about superheroes. I start writing stories, and I know a good story when I read it. So I've got to work with some amazing people. So how has it changed? That was your question. I told you to get off on tangents. But the big difference is now. With the Marvel movies and the CW, and it's wonderful. Like my son has a whole other connection to the Flash than I do, because I grew up reading the comics, but he really loves the show, and we're living in a glorious time of superhero entertainment where now the movies and the shows really reflect the canon of the original story. So, the Flash is Barry Allen. He's married to an Iris, and, and there's the Reverse Flash, and that's a major storyline, and it's all the characters come in on some form or another. And that makes me very happy when I see what I recognize as the character being brought to life. And so he's kind of digesting the story that way, but we can connect now about the Flash. And but with Comic-Cons, it's driven a lot of this, anything fantasy, sci-fi, any D&D, all that stuff. It's kind of all under that Comic-Con bubble now.
Right.
And as a result, like manufacturers and movie companies and everybody, they've really figured out like there's money to be made there. So now, you know, it like with San Diego Comic-Con, it's got kind of I started going to San Diego Comic-Con in the early 80s or the mid 80s when I was doing Space Beaver. And so I've watched that thing evolve from even like my first Comic-Con was at the old convention center in downtown San Diego. And now it's got this new one along the waterfront that I remember when that was opened. And it's so big now that like comic creators don't really have a way in anymore, like, which is ironic. You know, I know a lot of creators who have had to kind of scale back or not go at all because it's so expensive. It's impossible to get a hotel room, you know, and there's so much competition for the money that by the time a fan gets in the door, they've already spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars just to have a hotel room and to get the ticket. So then they want to get all the exclusive things from Hasbro and Mattel and whatever. And by the time they get to Artist Alley, which is like a teeny tiny part in the way back of the room at the show, like very few of them want to buy original sketches or, you know, meet artists. They want to meet the star of the new movie and the wait in Hall H, you know, and I'm a part of that now, which is, you know, not a bad thing, but it's interesting. I got last year at Comic-Con talking about how it changed. How this has changed over the years. As I said, I've been going there for years, and there's a Marriott right next to the big convention hall. And when I would go in the early 90s, when I had just broken into comics, mainstream comics, I'd gotten a job on Justice League, and I was getting some interest from Marvel. If you got invited to that Marriott to have dinner or, you know, drink with the editors or people that worked at either of the big two, you had really made it. That felt like, man, I've arrived because I'm getting to hang out at the Marriott with people that work at Marvel and DC. And this past year, last summer, I went and The Boys was the entire building of the Marriott.
Oh,
and there were buses going around with The Boys and my characters on them. And we took the entire gas lamp, which we used to walk through after con to go drink and hang out, was covered with Boys advertisement. And so, I mean, it was so big and overwhelming that I was like, wow, I remember just being happy to be here. And now I've co-created something that's all over the buildings, and Amazon was promoting it like crazy. It was really surreal and wonderful. But I'm also now part of the machine, you know.
Well, yeah. Well, you know, when you talk about the machine, I mean, how did you get involved in doing the series, doing the comic book idea?
The original idea was Garth Ennis, and he and I were friends, and I just was finishing my run on Transmetropolitan. He wanted to know if I wanted to do this book, and we were originally going to do it as something for DC Comics along the lines of his other successful series with John McCrae called Hitman, where it was going to be like this. It would be set in the DCU, but it wouldn't. But it would sort of be its own world where DC characters kind of came in and went. But as we really developed it, and I couldn't take it on at the time, but a year later, he still wanted to do it and hadn't, and he said it has to be you. So he was waiting for me to co-create this with him, which I was grateful for. And I went but then I was all in. I was like, I couldn't even believe I said no the first time because he's a great writer. And I knew we'd have a good time creating the book. And so we set about, I had a contract I had to finish out. And with Marvel, I was drawing Wolverine at the time. And that's what I had said yes to rather than The Boys. And so I was coming to the end of my contract and I was going to work on The Boys with him. And so when we started really talking about it, we realized it wasn't going to really work the way we thought it should if we did it at DC, because we would have to censor it too much. And we also, I love the DC universe, as I've been explaining. So I was like, I'm not really interested in tearing down Superman or being yet another guy that, you know, makes jokes about Batman's sexuality or any of that kind of stuff. Right. because those characters are a little bit sacred to me. Now to Garth, he grew up on a totally different kind of comic book, so they weren't at all. So for me, I'm like, if I'm creating something, and also I have a real sick sense of humor, because Space Beaver, the whole idea behind Space Beaver at the time was it was these cute animals, but when they like shoot each other, like guts would fly out and their heads would explode, and I draw the brains. That made me laugh. Cute animals with guts, you know. I don't know why, but made me laugh.
That's also Dick Tracy. Yeah, I mean, you know, shooting in the head.
Yeah, I guess it is. So I had so Garth coming, you know. So for me, like, I'm just drawing superheroes. I'm happy to draw superheroes. Plus, I like drawing dark, you know, violent stuff too. It's just sort of in my wheelhouse. So that's probably why I fit the book the way I did. And I started designing the characters and co-creating the characters with Garth, and and then we finally got a home at Wildstorm, which was under the DC umbrella at the time, and we got our first issue came out in 2006, and it was a huge hit. So we and then we got canceled 6 issues later.
Had they decided to cancel you right after the first issue because
we were like, I was drawing like issue 8 or 9, maybe even 10. I was like really far ahead because Garth is a very prolific writer, so I was able to like keep up at the time. And it was and I was exclusive with Wildstorm to draw just this book, so I had nothing to worry about. I could just focus on drawing, and I was loving it. I was really loving those early issues, and you know, I could tell we were creating something special, but I didn't know it was going to be as big as it was, or it is. But I knew it was going to be good. And then the first issue came out, and it was very controversial, but yet very successful. But the problem is that most comic books at the time were just kind of fly under the radar. And I guess ours was getting so much attention, and it was so controversial that the people much higher up than my publisher and my editor in chief and those guys, who were like loving it because we were doing good work. And it's a good book. I mean, it's dark, but it's good. I mean, it's really well written, and I was doing my best with the artwork. But some people, it made them uncomfortable, especially because it was, if you look at the original published issues, you'd see like, you know, horrible stuff with superheroes, and then an ad for Justice League, and then horrible stuff and swearing and, you know, horrible sex, and, you know, and then an ad for superheroes like Batman, you know. So it was like, I don't think they were comfortable with that being so close by, but they handled it very well. We were canceled, but they were very, very cool about it. It just, we realized it wasn't they wanted us to either tone it down or take it elsewhere. I think that really what it came down to.
If you tone it down, then you're totally completely, it doesn't work.
We didn't set it in the DCU in the first place. It has to be a contrast, because the whole idea behind The Boys, if you're familiar, the whole idea behind it is that what if our real world as we live in it now had superheroes?
Right.
And the idea is that if they did, they wouldn't be super. They would be corrupted by wealth and power and fame, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Like there, and that's what makes, and then the TV show's done a really great job of expanding on that theme and making the heroes very human and vulnerable, whereas they were kind of just foils for the boys in the comic. Like, they were interesting, but they weren't as challenging and deep as they are in the TV show. So the TV show is doing its own thing with our theme, but then they're staying very faithful where it counts, and then doing their own thing, which is actually making it kind of great as a TV show. So I'm pretty much best of both worlds at this point.
Okay. Well, you did go through the so it got canceled, and then you got picked up.
Yeah, immediately. Like, we got offered, because we were a huge hit. I mean, it was selling like crazy. So every publisher in the industry at some point or another contacted us and said, hey, bring it here. We'll do this for you. We'll do that for you. So it was really nice. We had our pick of publishers. I have a long-standing relationship with Nick Barucci of Dynamite Comics, and he told me, like, oh, I'm reading this book. I'm a fan. You got to bring it here. And I've known him so long that, you know, we both, Garth and I, agreed that Dynamite would be a good home for it. So,
but in terms of the mechanics of creator owned, you know, when you went into it with DC, you know, Wildfire, right? Is that what it was? Yeah. You had creator, not creator control, but it was creator owned, right?
Yeah, and creative control. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
and we were working with. I worked with at the time with probably my favorite person in the industry and one of the best editors I've ever worked with, Ben Abernathy, who's still at DC. He's in charge of the whole Batman line now. But Ben and I hit it off great, and had a long relationship with the Scott Dunbier, who was the publisher at the time, or Jim Lee was the publisher, but Scott was editor in chief. And I'd known Jim since the 80s. So I was surrounded by, and Hank Canals had a long relationship with him too. So I was surrounded by people that I knew well and knew me and knew my career. So we were very supported. And like I said, we were doing good work, and we were trusted to kind of do our thing. We went in saying, we're going to do, like, our posters said, this is going to, like, Garth notoriously said, I'm going to out preacher. So he was really clear about what we were going to do. We were going to do something that was going to really shock and awe, and it did. But it was just a matter of we didn't think we were doing anything, I don't know, wrong. We were just making a good comic that was dark, and it's funny because comics have to go under a different. They're always like held to a different standard, at least up until then. It's like it's weird. Like if we had filmed this, like I said, it's a TV show now.
Yeah.
It's great, but it's just as dark as the comic. But it's weird. Like if you illustrate it, somehow there's an underlying idea that I guess comics are essentially have to be okay for kids to read them too. And
yeah, that's the Dr. Warner, whatever his name was. Seduction of the Innocent. I mean, you go back to EC and all of that.
Yeah, and EC was like so great, but they weren't for children. They weren't. I mean, kids were reading them, but they weren't aimed at them. You could tell that they were more challenging than that, and that's kind of like. And right now, most of the comic book industry for years has like kind of evolved to where most readers are adults that I can see. I mean, I'm sure but now it's pretty good. Like there are comics for kids and there's comics for adults, and that's okay. But for a long time, it's like if you said the word comic book, immediately most people think, all right, it's lowbrow, it's juvenile, it's meant for children. And if you do something dirty in it, then you're corrupting children somehow. So you couldn't write The Sopranos as a comic book under those rules. Like, even though it's okay for it to be a TV show, and it's okay for me to take a prop gun and put it to somebody's head and have a squib blow out the other side of their head on a close-up. And
but if DC were or Time Warner were HBO, during that period of time, it would be no problem.
But they are. It's just that there's was a different standard for like comic books have to be like this, and movies and TV can be like that. And that's sort of like the it made it really challenging in a lot of ways to do something controversial or progressive or with a new idea. I worked on another book, Transmetropolitan, for years too, and there were limits to what we could get away with in Transmetropolitan, and that's okay, that's just the way it is. Even though it was for mature readers, it said it on the cover of both. The boys said for mature readers. It wasn't like we were marketing to children. We were trying to explore a theme. But when you bring superheroes into it, that also doubles down on the implication that maybe it's children, even though most superhero readers in 2006 were adults.
Yeah, but back that's right. In the 1940s, everybody read them.
Right. And that's and the idea was also that we weren't doing things simply to shock. There's a story to be told in The Boys, and it's a good one. It's a really good one.
Things changed during the 1950s, with the comics code, because if you go and you can look at some of the 1940s with Plastic Man or what have you, they're talking about cocaine. They're talking about within the realm of the superhero stuff. I mean, that was all there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like it was definitely the comics code set us back as an industry a decade and a half, which is interesting because that's kind of where like the film and TV are just kind of catching up to where comics were 20 years ago. So all the stuff you see in the Marvel movies was based on stuff that came out in the mid 70s, some
Mm-hmm.
like some of the shows are based on stuff that came out in the 80s, you know, so it's interesting that it's evolved this way where there's lots of material to be adapted, but they're going way back to the roots, which is good because that's why the characters are coming off authentic. But it's interesting because comics have had a different job where they have to keep, you know, monthly readers entertained. So they're way down the road ahead with what we're doing in comics right now. It's an interesting time to be a creator. I'll put it that way.
Right. Are you doing? I mean, before I get out of comic book land, are you doing series right now?
Yeah, I am, but it's I can't talk about it because
Okay.
I'm doing I could say well, I'm doing a book called Oliver for Image Comics, which is coming out very slowly because I have to do other work while I do my creator own, and it's written by Gary Whitta, who wrote Rogue One and Book of Eli, and a good friend of mine, and we're about to come out with our first trade paperback in the near future, collecting the first 4 issues, and I'm working on issue 5. But I'm also working on another book for a major company with a great writer and a major character, and I can't talk about it, but it's really good, and I'm excited.
Okay.
But it's not announced yet, so I can't say. That's all I can say.
Okay. Buttons. Just zip it up. That's all.
Yeah,
I know. Okay. Well. Okay. So you've gotten how far into the run of the boys was it before you were approached about doing by Amazon, or was it Amazon?
well, that's a very long story. What's funny is like right after we got canceled and we ended up over at Dynamite, Hollywood came knocking. So that was 2008, and Sony Pictures, the film and side of things, under Neil Moritz Kickstart, like they optioned it, and they were going to make it into a franchise. Like, you know, this is the gentleman who brought us Fast and the Furious, that 9-picture phenomenon, 10 pictures now, I think. He loved the boys and wanted to make a movie and build it into something. And so we were like super excited. We thought, this is it, it's happening. And that was 2008. So for the next 10 years, every year was the year it was about to happen. Up until 2011, when there was a tsunami and Sony started cutting stuff, and we ended up getting put into turnaround, which is a term in Hollywood for when they let your option go and anybody else can pick it up because they're no longer interested in keeping the option. So I personally was pretty crestfallen that, you know, it had taken that long because Adam McKay was attached, fantastic Oscar-winning writer-director. Adam McKay was going to direct it, and I had seen what he was going to do with it. He and I had become friends, and it was, and the screenwriters had written a really fun screenplay that he went in and like bolstered, and we all thought it was going to happen, and then it just went into turnaround. So it was like we were pretty sure that it was never going to happen at that point. And then a couple of years went by, and Eric Kripke found out that The Boys was available as a property, and through Paramount had it for a couple of years. They didn't go forward with it. And then Eric Kripke found out it was available as a property. He loves the comic, and so he actually went out of his way to set up a situation where he could do the TV series for Sony Television, and then Cinemax was going to do it, and then they backed away because they didn't think they could give it the proper budget, from my understanding, and then Amazon, Sharon Tal, I think her name is, and she was already she brought it over to Amazon when she moved jobs, so. Between that group, like as long as when we had Motivated, and I believe Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg were attached to it at that point too. And so those guys were like this powerhouse force to get it set up at Amazon or Sony, so Amazon Prime would release it. And boy, did they. So that's how it got there. But it was a long, long journey.
Right. Yeah. I mean, people don't, it always seems like, oh, it can't, yeah, you did the comic book. Hollywood comes knocking on your door, and wow, yeah, the money comes rolling in, right?
No, it's a long. We you know, even still, it's like, you know, it's not. you don't become a millionaire overnight. You know, the money's nice, but it's limited because I'm not the director. I'm just the guy that created the comic book. You know,
Right.
it's not like,
you know,
I benefit from it, but it's not, you know, I'm not retiring anytime soon.
okay. Well, they say you're still working. You still have to
Like
work.
crazy. Yeah.
You're not attached to. You're not on production. You know, you're not.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the people that make the show, Eric Kripke, he's wonderful, and his whole crew is wonderful. And what makes it really nice is that he's set up like in a way that he was able to bring me in other ways. So I ended up doing artwork for the show, and I've been on set both for season 1 and season 2, and created, and they hired me to create stuff for season 2. So it's been very nice, like that regard. I am involved in the production, and that's been great. So, but it's not like I don't go into the writer's room and tell them what to do or anything.
Yeah, well, they say that a lot of people don't understand that part of it, where you know you've sold the rights basically, right? Or is it rental? How does that work?
Well, we still own it. Like we still own, like Garth and I still own the copyright, but but the TV and movie rights, you know, Sony has now.
But that's what I mean, is that they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, but we'll be consulted and included because that's in our agreement. So it's like they're never going to carve us out of it, and they've never even tried to. They've been nothing but welcoming and friendly and great. I've had a very good Hollywood experience as far as The Boys goes.
Oh yeah, well that's great to hear, because you know a lot of times, I mean, because
I've had horror shows too. So I mean,
yeah, and that's what people, you know, don't quite understand. They said, well, I'll create. Well, here's another thing, is that when Garth and you were creating the comic book, were you thinking about getting it as a TV series or movie? Or
I wasn't. I mean, in 2008, I mean, when 2006 when it came out, you know, like it was 2 years before Marvel Studios put out Iron Man, and that changed everything.
Right.
So Iron Man came out 2 years after we started doing The Boys, and so as far as what a movie could be with the superheroes, that's why I don't think it ever got into be made into a film, because it would have been too controversial. And I know that everybody that was working on developing the original film wanted it to be a hard R, and they wrote it as a PG-13. Because they didn't think you could put superheroes on screen doing the things that the boys would do. So it was a good screenplay, but you could feel that it wasn't there. And then Adam McKay was like pushing for the hard R and wrote it like that. And it was just always a matter of like it made people nervous, just like it did as a comic book. So I don't think it ever got made for that reason. So, you know, and that's, so for me, I as a creator, it really is never been of my interest to make anything other than a great comic book. The comic book needs to be great in and of itself. If you're just making a comic book as a shortcut to get a film or a TV show made, you're kind of doing the medium of comics a huge disservice. What you should do is work on movie pitches. You should write screenplays. You shouldn't make it a comic book just to sell a movie, because if you do that, people kind of smell that out. Comic fans especially are, and geek culture, they're not stupid. These are very savvy readers, and they're the most critical people you're going to find online. They know when something is fishy. And you know, I hear from, you know, the stuff that's been adapted as it is, like, you know, there's people that don't like the Boys show because it's not, you know, verbatim the comic, you know, and you let them change too much. I'm like, I didn't let them do anything. They did what they were going to do, and they showed me and the work a great deal of love and respect. So I'm happy. But there are people that are hardcore fans of the comic that are like, Butcher shouldn't have a beard. Huey needs to look like Simon Pegg, you know, and even though Simon Pegg's in the show, that's not enough. They need and I'm like that too. So I'm being a hypocrite if I don't look at stuff that gets adapted the way I want it to be adapted, get upset. But, you know, you can't take a comic book and turn it into a film or a TV show like It's not a magic recipe. It's just like I was talking about the black and white boom of the 1980s. Just because you got a black and white comic with animals in it doesn't mean it's the next Ninja Turtles.
No. Well, a lot of people don't seem to. My channel is an educational channel, so to speak. With all the interviews and the how-tos that I do with animation and what have you. Part of this conversation is to really, anybody who's watching, let's put it down and say, you have one of the most successful transitions from comic books to TV, in terms of, of being hardcore, at least. And so the realities are TV is TV, comic books are comic books, and the artwork, these are two separate things. There's two separate pieces.
In the world of the boys, even as we created it in the comic, there were comics about those characters, but they were all propaganda. They were not, they were like basically lies created to protect the image of these characters. And the TV show picked up on that brilliantly to show that, because and that's where they hired me to do stuff for the first season, where when they're walking down the hallways of the Seven Tower, the artwork of the comic book covers, that's all my artwork. Like they hired me to do artwork and do the actors' likenesses and stuff as comic book characters so they could put them on the set. So so in the world of the boys, comic books are still like just a tool to sell the image of the characters. So
right. Well, listen, that's a page right out of the original Captain Marvel adventures, because sometimes Billy Batson would be talking to Mary Marvel and saying, "Okay, well, I'll see you in the next issue of Whiz Comics."
Breaking that fourth wall.
Oh yeah, no, breaking that wall. And that's the thing that you could do with comic books. It really depends on what you're doing. I mean, like Fantastic Four. When Fantastic Four in the first few 10 episodes, when Johnny Storm has walked away from Reed and Ben and Sue, and he's in he's at a barbershop. He picks up an old Submariner comic book. And then he walks down the street, and he sees the Submariner, and he says, "Wait a minute, it looks like," and he takes out his flame, and it's an old bum, and it's really Submariner.
That's so cool. I always found that interesting, because I want to know in the Marvel U, whenever or like I remember that as a kid growing up, like they'd show Batman and Robin, and they'd be reading Batman and Robin comics as a way of selling them, This was like in the 60s and 70s. But and I was like, you don't see it as much anymore, but they would have like pinups of like all the DC, all the Flash's villains would get together for like the Rogues, and they got like a banner that says Flash's Rogues Gallery, and they're all posing for a picture. And I'm thinking, like, there's a story to be written just about that photo being taken, but at the same time, like as a kid, you would just it was like they existed in that world simply to exist in that world.
Right.
And in the boys, it's like we took it a step further, where it's like, what would that world be like if it was our world?
Right.
So, and with that, but I always wondered, like when they show Batman and Robin reading the comics, like what would those comics be like? Because it's same thing with Spider-Man. Like I remember like Spider-Man reading a Spider-Man comic. I'm like, okay, so if these comics exist in their world, what are those stories? Because it would be giving away their secret identities immediately. Because we know when we read a Batman or a Spider-Man, that is Peter Parker and Bruce Wayne.
Right.
So immediately, like that can't be part of their story. Same with otherwise they have no secret identities. Like but the comic books would be spilling everything.
Right. Well, but with comic books, the writing is one thing, and the visuals are something else. When you're doing a page, and a thing with so much of the early 1940s and mid 40s, with Eisner and Kirby.
Eisner,
and Kirby and was it Jack Cole? all of those they were not confined to the panels.
No.
They came out. They broke the panel.
Yeah, I mean, more Eisner than anybody knew how to just make a page flow with almost no panel structure.
Right,
I learned so much from him.
Yeah, and when you're writing, when you're writing for comics, has to allow the artist to say, okay, there's too many words here. I need to be able to do something with it. What kind of a relationship did you have with Garth to be able to do that in the book?
Well, it's different with each writer. I mean, nobody writes just like art style is different. Everybody's got their own writing style and their own way of approaching collaboration. And Garth was very specific. Like he knew exactly what he wanted, and he was very descriptive, and would make a lot of notes about the art. And I sometimes have to go back and lay out a whole new page because he wanted something bigger, and it wasn't just a matter of like blowing it up. He'd have to redesign the entire page to make something bigger. But whereas like Warren Ellis, when I worked with him on Transmetropolitan, the deeper into it we got, the less he felt like he needed to tell me. So I got more freedom with Warren Ellis to just kind of create my own, my own page the way I imagined it. I knew but part of the job with both cases is I feel like it's my responsibility as an artist to bring the writer's vision to life. I get more into like I'm telling the story. That's the important part for me. Like it's not about how great my artwork looks or how flashy I can make a panel or whatever. It's about telling the story. And I got more dedicated to that as I got out of the 90s, where flashy art was like kind of where it was at. As I got older, I was more interested in telling a story.
Right.
So and that's where I'm at now. So I feel very dedicated to whatever writer I'm working with to really bring their story forward and tell it as nuanced as I can with the visuals, at the same time making it dynamic and easy to read. And that balance is what it's all about. So with, in both cases, we had successful collaborations because I'll steer into, it's kind of like I did a little bit of acting when I was a young man and on a stage, and each person I would interact with as an actor, I had to kind of understand what their strengths were, as what their pentameter was, how we would have a back and forth, and I'd adjust to that person. Well, it's kind of like the same thing with writing and art. It's like I'm the actor with my artwork, so I'm adjusting to that writer, and I try to bring out the nuances of that writer's style, like what the impact of the story is, focusing on what the theme of the story is. It dictates whether or not I do like noir or light and funny. I don't just try to bring one set of tools to every job I do. I try to, like an actor, I want to be that character for that role.
Right. But you also have to design the set. You're doing the camera angle.
You do it all. I'm the director. I'm the costume designer. I'm the I'm the lighting guy. I'm the everything but sound. But and part of that is because what you were saying is that also I have a script that tells me what the dialogue is going to be. So I know if there's a lot of dialogue to draw a panel to leave room for the dialogue.
Are you? Yeah, I was about to say a lot of times people are just drawing the pictures. Are you composing the dialogue, the panels for where you think they all should be, so that you've got plenty of room?
Yes,
to do that.
That's part of that. That's the nuts and bolts of the job. I mean, if you're not making room for dialogue, then you're a rookie, And also, part of it is because what you don't want is to draw a spectacular face or a really interesting costume and then have it all covered up with word balloons because you didn't give anywhere for the word balloons to go.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of. I see a lot of that in today's comic books because the pictures are there, and then let's slap on dialogue balloons where we can.
Well, some writers just write a plot and then they add the dialogue after. I don't. Some writers write a very tight script. They say it's 5 panels. Panel 1, Peter Parker walks into his apartment. Panel 2, the phone rings. And panel 3, he answers the phone. Panel 4, Peter looks shocked. Aunt May is in trouble. The dialogue is, what
Mhm.
hospital? I'll be right there. Panel 6, you see Spider-Man leaping from a window.
Right.
You know? So
Right.
on his way to Queens to check in on Aunt May. So that's like a way, and it'll all be very specifically laid out that way. Now, I just improvised that
Right.
script, but I would know that, okay, if I'm drawing that, panels 1 through 4 don't need to be that big. They
Right.
need to have room for the sound effects. They need to have things, but panel 5, when Spider-Man's leaping out the window, that's the money shot. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure you design your page so that bottom panel is a great shot of Spider-Man leaping from a window, because that's what people are buying a Spider-Man comic for.
Mm-hmm.
But you also want the leading up to have an emotional impact. So you're worrying with Spider-Man about if Aunt May is going to be okay.
Right. And the flow has to be there. I mean, your
Yes.
eyes have to be told. You
Everything
have
has
to lead
to
the eye.
travel, left to right on an invisible S. Like
Right.
it has to flow like this throughout the page, so your eye knows where to go next, and you don't think about it. If you're lost on the page, if an
Mm-hmm.
artist has you like looking all over the place, or you're not sure which panel follows what,
Mm-hmm.
or you can't really figure out what's going on without any dialogue, then you're not doing the job right, in my opinion. That's what I aspire to, is that. And the nicest compliments I get are people that look at my work and go, "Oh, I can follow it without even any dialogue. I feel like I know what's going on." I'm like, "Then I'm doing my job."
Hey, great. That's it's visual storytelling. That's
Absolutely, and
basically
that's I learned that from John Byrne. Like he said, I remember there's this Art of John Byrne book that came out in the early '80s, late '70s, early '80s, and in the end of it, he had this black and white story that he wrote. It was like 4 or 5 pages, and there was not a single word of dialogue in it, and you completely follow it, and it had an emotional impact at the end. Not a word is spoken in the whole thing. So he just shows like the brilliance of his ability to tell a story without any words. And some of the most powerful moments in The Boys and Transmetropolitan were silent beats.
Mm-hmm.
I did a issue 8, one of my favorite stories of Transmetropolitan, called Another Cold Morning. The last 3 pages are completely silent.
Hmm.
And it was my job to make the emotional impact come through.
Right.
I think I did.
Yeah. That's. I'm curious about. I mean, we're getting up to the hour mark, and I don't know if you have any more time.
I'm okay.
Okay. All right.
I'm in quarantine. What am I?
Well, I don't
I'm
know.
not going anywhere.
You may have to do laundry. You may have to do laundry. For all I know.
Actually, I got to draw, but it's all right. I got a long day ahead of me to just draw.
Okay. Now for myself, for example, I'm doing crowdfunding, for my independent work.
I know. I got your book.
Oh yes, thank you. Well, I'm not going to be. I'm doing stuff now for the age groups of like 4 years old to about 10, 12-year-olds.
Is that your Mighty Moose character?
Yeah, Mighty Moose and the Snuffy and Zoe stuff.
Yeah,
Snuffy and Zoe is from between 4 to 7-year-olds, and then from 8 to about 11-year-olds is Mega Moose.
That's great. Mega Moose.
Yes,
and that's the age group I've managed to alienate entirely. So,
well, there you go. There's plenty of room for me. But I'll be doing. I'm doing like so many other people doing crowdfunding.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is that the age groups are, you have to be very specific as to what you're doing. If is there anything that amongst in the crowdfunding, do you actually go into that? Do you look at it? Are you too busy or what? Yeah.
No, I don't know if I'm lucky or if it's just not something I've done. I have had almost no experience other than supporting other people's campaigns and providing stuff for other people's campaigns. I've done covers, and like I'm part of some Kickstarters and things like that because they approach me and hire me to do covers so they can sell a variant cover with my name on it or get me to draw their character or something like that. But I personally haven't done it. I've thought about it for Space Fever, but I've been blessed in that I'm usually very, very busy and with multiple projects, and I have not had trouble finding a publisher. So those two things have been a benefit of 30 plus years in the business and a couple of hits under my belt.
Right.
Right now it's great. I got the world's greatest calling card with the boys. So
I know. Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm just thinking about the ones that you gravitate to. What kind of crowdfunders do you gravitate to?
I think we got a comment from Orion Wynn.
Where am I going?
I think he was laughing at what I said. Like, where am I going? I'm in quarantine. Hi, Ryan.
Hey, Ryan. You've been drawing on my or writing on my wall here. So, have you ever? Are you thinking, or do you have stories in your own head that you just want to do?
Oh yeah, like the irony is that I've never stopped writing. I've been published as a writer too. I've written Conan the Barbarian. I wrote some Spider-Man stories that are published. So I'm published as a writer. I'm writing a thing for DC at the moment, but and drawing it. But it's just the irony is that I've worked with so many great writers and have so many great writers that want to still collaborate that it almost feels self-indulgent to not work with these great writers as opposed to writing and drawing my own thing. I'm not a writer on the caliber of the people that do it all the time. So at the same time, like I'm an okay writer. I'm good enough to sell a story and get it published. But and I like writing and drawing my own stuff, but I really thrive on collaboration. I mean, I find that, even if I could write and draw my own thing, it's more fun to have somebody to bounce stuff off of and get reactions from and dream together. I'm still that little kid who wants to play superheroes in the schoolyard, like I'd rather be doing that and collaborating than sitting in my own mental space by myself all the time. It's like I think somebody said about Wally Wood, it's not a good idea stewing your own juices too much.
Okay.
But I like it. I mean, I like writing and drawing, but I come up with stuff. I mean, I got more ideas than I have time to take action on. So I'm
right.
But that's, I have this dream someday, like I'm going to have enough money and enough time to just do my own thing. And, and I'd probably just watch TV if I could. There's a lot of books that I haven't read. I might sit around just reading.
Yeah. What's your work day like? What is your?
I average about 10 hours in my studio a day. I get up around 9ish, and depending on how I slept, and on a good day, if I sleep well, I get up around 9ish and bring my coffee downstairs and get in front of the computer and go crazy reading the news and
YouTube,
all the things that are upsetting me that I think everybody should be upset by.
Yeah.
And then I eventually answer emails while I'm doing it, and I'm doing all my business stuff while I read the news and replying to people like yourself and setting stuff up, and and then around and then I have my workout in front of me, and I'll stop and I'll work a little bit. I'll read a little news. I have to get my eyes breaks now because I actually need glasses, 3 different pairs of glasses that I have to change to whatever I'm doing.
Oh, geez. Okay.
No fun. And especially I had 20/20 vision up until about 5 years ago. And now I just went, so welcome to middle age.
Oh, there you go. Welcome to old age.
So, but I draw while I'm working. I draw while I'm answering emails and throughout the day and things like that. And around dinner time, I try to wrap it up and have something finished and turned in, and I do it again tomorrow. It's like, as I say on my Twitter handle, I'm living an endless Tuesday.
Yeah. Well, so it's like having a daily comic strip.
Except there's never a punchline.
You don't have to. I mean,
you're like Mary Word.
always got to keep going.
Keeps going and going. Yeah.
You just keep on going. Yeah. That's what that is.
That's the thing. I have a cartoon that I woke up with in my head, like a strip cartoon, and I haven't even had a chance to jot it down.
Oh, jeez. Well,
yeah, so on the average, I'm like I said, I try to get I can pencil a page or 2 a day. As long as I'm going to ink it myself, it doesn't have to be too tight. Because if I'm penciling for somebody else to ink it, it's like I may as well ink it because the same amount of time goes in. I'm finishing with a pencil as opposed to
Okay, so you're still doing pencil on paper.
Yeah, I love working traditionally. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Right.
I mean, I know that there's my son's working on a digital tablet. He's a growing artist himself, very good. But he works on a tablet, and he's doing really cool stuff. I know that there's a lot you can do with it, but
Mhm.
there's something really satisfying about having a piece of original art when you're done with it.
Mhm.
And and also people will purchase it. So like, this is a pen and ink
Yep.
drawing,
Right.
and it's going for charity. I sold it for charity. Um, Waiting for lockdown to end up. Whoever bought this, if you're watching, it's here. I'm just waiting for lockdown to end so I can figure out how to ship stuff out again.
All right.
But if I did that digitally, I wouldn't have anything to sell. And also, there's something special about my dad was an airline mechanic and a mechanic his whole life, and it's like if my hands aren't dirty at the end of the day, I don't feel like I really worked.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I like having to wash my hands at the end of the day, get the graphite and the ink off them, and
You get along this side, right alongside here.
Yep. I got a permanent indentation on this finger.
That's right. Well, you just hold the pen too hard.
Yeah, I can't. That's just the way I work. It takes a lot of concentration out. My eyes are going.
So you're doing the 10 by 15, or are you 12 by 18?
11 by 17.
How much?
11 by 17.
11 by 17. Yeah, but I'm just, okay. That's including the edges, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the entire, like that piece I was just holding up. This is an 11 by 17 piece of Bristol.
Right. Okay. Well, all right. Let's do it. Do you have any questions for me? Because
do I, or are you asking me watchers?
I'm asking to you. You have any questions that you've about anything at all?
Yeah, I do. Okay, so it's 19. Were you doing the animation for the holiday special in 76?
It was 78.
78. So the movie was already out when you guys started production. Of course.
Yeah.
Because it followed up. It wasn't. So I was wondering if it was planned in coordination with the movie, but then I'm remembering that the movie was a huge hit and they were capitalizing.
Yeah.
So did you have any involvement with Lucas directly?
No, personally, no. There was was
he part of the
pardon?
Was he involved in the production in any way?
Yeah, it's his script. His script of the actual his script. He wrote the cartoon.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
So Lucas wrote that cartoon.
Yes, I've got that. I still have my script.
That's amazing. I didn't know he wrote that. That's awesome. That's why it's the best thing in the whole show.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
I always wanted to see that dinosaur on the screen with Boba Fett riding that dinosaur. That was dream stuff for me. Like, I thought for sure when we got to Empire Strikes Back and I heard Boba Fett was going to be in it that we were going to see that creature. I love that water planet too. That water planet was so cool.
Well, again, it's Mobius. The referencing that was to be working with off of a style that was Mobius style and from heavy metal.
Oh, that's great. Did he work on it with you at all?
Mobius?
John Gerard? Yeah.
No. We just looked at it.
You're just influenced by it.
It was just influenced by it.
That's cool. Yeah, he's still one of my great inspirations. Whenever I start I can say that.
Star Wars.
Whenever I start world building, I always go back and look at like his designs for Dune, and I love his work. He did 3 covers for Transmetropolitan.
Oh, cool!
So he drew my characters.
Oh, great!
And because I designed everybody in Transmetropolitan, and because as the co-creator, those were my original designs. And what I loved so much was I just found out about it because the way I would go into the offices in those days. I was living in New York. Mm-hmm. And my editor told me, like, we got Mobius doing the next set of covers. I went, oh, what? It's like somebody telling me, like, Elvis is going to sing the songs you wrote. Like, really? So I go, well, when are they going to come in? He goes, they're already done. And then they pulled them out and showed them to me. And Mobius drew Spider Jerusalem. It was quite a day. That was like one of the highlights of that series for me, seeing Mobius drawing my character.
Well, the only we have the script from Lucas. We have the script. We had the information, the video, the black and white video of Boba Fett in the white stormtrooper.
Oh wow! Like when his original version.
That was the original version. That's all we had. We had that, and I think there might have been.
Was it then the animations production's idea to color him?
Yeah, we worked.
Instead of making it white.
We had to. We worked with off of the coloring, the Mobius style of coloring, right? Because that was our thing. We had to.
The reason that Boba Fett's gray and all that is because of you guys.
Yeah.
Like, is that you're the reason that they changed from white to color?
I don't know that. I just know that white would not have worked on the screen because you've got to remember 1977, 1978. Yes, color had been out for about 10 years, but you still had a lot of old black and white TV sets. So the color schemes had to work on black and white. So you had your tonal things of, you had the characters had to pop against the backgrounds. So you had to really play with all of that, but not just color wise. You had the tonalities, the grays.
Oh, that's fine. I actually came across these color photos from the Addams Family set, and like the Addams Family house was like lots of like pinks and greens, and it's like kind of bright and cheery. But that's because they were working with gray tones because it was a black and white television show. So like painted in a way that would work on that monochromatic scale.
Right. Well, the same way with the George Reeves Superman series, originally in black and white, his S is brown.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's a gray suit. The gray leotards, but it's a brown. It's a brown shorts. And it might have been a white belt, or I know it would have been toned down for yellow, but it was still a gray, and it was a brown S and brown pants. So you had to play with different tonalities. It's different from what we have today, where everything could be anything. You could see the big screen, but back then the widest screen was maybe about 19 inches.
Oh, that's crazy.
So when you're watching a 19-inch diagonal screen, you got to be able to see everything on that.
Because we're all at home, my son is studying. I don't know if you're picking up on the piano.
Oh no, I'm fine.
Then okay, my son is practicing because he's studying for his music final, and he's practicing. I don't know if that's coming through, but I was going to try to.
No, that's okay. We're just, we'll wrap it up. We're into the.
I'm not trying to ask you questions about the Star Wars.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So, one, after we get off of this, you're going to have to share that script with me. I hate to break it to you, but I need to read that script.
Yeah, we'll figure out a way. Yes,
I still have a copy. I need to read that. That's
okay. Okay.
Also, so when did you see any of the other special while you were working on the animated parts, or did they all assembled at the end?
No, they just we knew it was going to be a 9-minute segment right in the middle of the show. We knew we were going to do that, and
and were you working on it well ahead of everybody else because of the amount of time it was going to take?
Yeah, how
long did it take you to do that 9 minutes?
The 9 minutes, we were really rushed. I think we had about for animation from beginning to end, it was 6 weeks to do the animation, and then I think we had the lead, Clive Smith, who was the director, part owner of Nelvana, and Frank Nissen. They were doing the storyboards and such, and they got the okay from Lucas. I think it was around Christmas time. That was a 77. Okay, we would pick up the Lucas chose Nelvana to be the studio to do that segment because he wanted he didn't want one of the California story. He didn't want the usual, and so he had.
It was unusual.
Well, he saw Nelvana's A Cosmic Christmas.
Oh, I've never seen that.
Yeah, that was the one where we had it was the first Nelvana Christmas it was a TV special.
Is that on YouTube or something? Can I try? Is that on YouTube?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, you can find A Cosmic Christmas.
I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah. That was the first job that I worked on first as an animator after Raggedy Ann and Andy.
That's how I got into the feature.
Pardon?
You worked on that feature with
yes,
the blue camel.
Oh yeah, I worked on that. Worked on Tubby the Tuba. You know, there were a bunch of shows. I didn't get credit because of Canadian content and British, Americans and whatnot. But I did the Spacemen. I did Mom and Dad and Granny, and that was my first segment. I did a lot of animation on that, so I got that. And then so when I had been hired by Friz Freleng as an animator. That gave me my chops. I said, okay,
wow.
Did
you work on Looney Tunes?
Pardon?
Did you work on any Looney Tunes?
No, I worked at Patty Freleng.
So like Pink Panther and that stuff?
Yeah, that sort of thing. Where the Mr. Magoo's and the Baggy
Art.
Yeah, worked on the 1978 TV series. They had like 3 series, and I worked on those.
Wow!
But while I was there, one of the business partners, one of the owners of Nelvana, brought the reel and showed it to Lucas, and he said, "Okay, I want them," because Canadian animation at that time was very different from American.
Yeah, very. Like that's actually one of the things that I didn't like as a kid, and I like it more now because I understand animation better. But as a kid, like it really bothered me that R2 and 3PO had all that stretch and squash going on.
Well,
for me, that like, oh no, you're violating something by not having them rigid and
Well,
and a lot of people were like Han looks so strange, and they were really exaggerating. But I loved that. Like that, I like the exaggerations because I was a Mad Magazine fan. So
okay,
I appreciate it from that level because it kind of almost looked like a Mort Drucker drawing of, or Jack Davis drawing of Han Solo as opposed to, exactly.
Well,
and did Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill, did they do the voices?
Yeah, they did them all. Princess Leia, Mark Hamill. They're all. Han Solo. They all. Harrison Ford. They all did that. They all did the voices.
Wow, I mean, think about what a little piece of Star Wars you have there. That your cartoon has all the original cast, and it's written by Lucas. It's like that's like a missing treasure piece of that.
Well, he didn't want it. I mean, he hates the.
Well, I know, but he should. Clearly, he loved the cartoon because he would spin off and do, droids and Ewoks.
Yes,
so somebody. I mean, he must have been behind those on some level.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was his thing, but it took. I think we had maybe about 3 months total from beginning to end, from storyboard to final cut, to do that 10-minute segment. And there's a lot of work in that.
Yeah, it shows. I mean, like I said, it's a very detailed world, and like I said, I'm always kind of disappointed I didn't get that Boba Fett riding a dinosaur. Maybe we'll get it in The Mandalorian.
Maybe, but it won't be mine. That's all.
Maybe they'll use your influence. What did you? And you did all the key animation on Boba Fett himself?
Yeah, I did all the drawing on all the animation on Boba Fett.
What was
also sometimes if he was in the same scene as Chewbacca, I would do that.
Oh,
and then, so there was anytime there was interaction, you would do both characters if you were the lead animator.
That makes sense. Do you have any of that production art still?
Well, some of it. Well, all of the final production art was gathered up and sent to back to Lucas.
That makes sense.
But I either have the original garbage drawings that, and you in your in the sketchbook that you've got is some of the Boba Fett. Those are the first drawings I would do, and those would usually be thrown into the trash.
And you still have those?
Yes.
And that's how they made it into the book?
Yeah.
Awesome. That's
yeah.
awesome. Now, what did you find most challenging? Like for me, like when I have to work on model for comics, the thing I find really challenging with a character like Boba Fett, and he seemed like it'd be a nightmare to work on, trying to think of him three-dimensionally and keep everything proportionate and consistent, especially with that backpack. Like, what did you find most challenging about drawing him three-dimensionally?
I think in terms of molding clay, so I wasn't really worried about that. And then also sometimes you cheat, as long as I mean, it's a two-dimensional thing. It's not like 3D where you're building a model and you have and things get in the way.
Yeah,
there's a lot of cheating going on with that backpack because otherwise you'd always having something stuck, over your head. So you have to think about where's
that's one of the things that made it so dynamic.
How do I, my positive and negative spaces, how do I make something look good with
but that's what I think you're cheating and actually made that cartoon very dynamic, because I imagine whenever I'm looking up his leg at a low angle when he's on that dinosaur, you're hiding that backpack a little bit.
Oh yeah.
So you don't have to draw it.
I mean, otherwise that would be it. It's still it's still there, but it's in a way that is
just suggested rather than obvious.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So you don't have to draw the whole backpack if you can avoid it.
No, and that's why it's a 3/4.
Right.
He's looking at camera. It's 3/4, and so you're only seeing so much of that, and strategically placing that. What is it? The spear or the blast or whatever it is back there, and you're moving it, in the way that makes more sense dynamically.
Yeah. Wow. So that's super cool. Like I had no idea. Like I didn't know up until today that Lucas wrote that cartoon. That's incredible.
Yep.
And that must have been. And were you in awe of the property like most people are now, or were you just like, it's another job?
Well, no, I wanted that. I wanted Boba Fett, and I really enjoyed Star Wars. I saw it. I saw it when it first came out. I mean, I was in California. I know, and I was on the second row looking up at one of the theater. What was it? El Capitan. Oh yeah, one of the LA, because I was there, and we
have seen it at Mann's. Didn't it debut at Mann's?
I don't know where it I don't know where it actually.
I just always see these like famous pictures of it opening, and it's at Mann's, and then there's
maybe it is. I can't remember where we just said, okay, we heard about this, and it's a really good movie, and so let's go and see it. We said, let's go see it. So we did. I said, okay, well, there's only 2 rows, that you can see it in because it was already sold out. Okay.
Yeah. Wow.
Go in, and so we said, okay. So
you had already experienced the phenomenon before getting the job.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, because that's 1977. I got the job in 78. So
I was 9, and it's like my head is still trying to recover from seeing that.
I tell you, if you watch one of those 40-foot long screens, and you're looking straight up, and then the ship is coming over your head. Yeah. I mean, that's the first time. That's the first experience that I had of Star Wars.
That's I remember that moment, and I remember Superman the movie when he's chasing the missile and we're going over the hills. Yeah. And I saw both of those movies in the theater as often as I could. And with Superman, I would go sit in the, and this is like my parents would drop me off for a matinee.
Right.
So I would go, or they go to see a movie that I didn't want to see, and they'd let me go see Superman again, and I meet them afterwards, and I would go sit in the front row in the center seat just so I could feel like with Star Wars, so I could go down the trench and the Death Star.
Yeah,
So Superman, so I could like, because I'd be there by myself. There'd be 4 other people in the theater, and I'd have my arms out in front of me. So I'm flying like Superman, you know, having the 3D experience, you know.
yeah,
But yeah, that was a great time to be a kid.
yeah. Well, it's a different time back then. It's a different time of and that was film. It was 35 millimeter film.
Yep.
You know, so there's a graininess to it. There's
cuts, and you could see, you know, cells burned that would pop in there every once in a while. You'd see the burns.
Yeah.
You know, where they had to change the reel.
Yeah.
Yeah, we take so much. There's so much. It's such a different world. Like all the things that, you know, I was thinking about back then. What we would get in small quantities would leave a great desire to create. And that's why those figures were so important. Those action figures were so important, because in those days, if you saw a movie, that was it. Like you never really had the belief that you'd see that movie ever again.
Right.
It's like you'd see that movie once, and then maybe if it came back around in the theaters, woohoo, you know. But at those days, there was no HBO, there was no video cassettes, there was nothing. You saw the movie in the theater, and then maybe years later they'd show it on TV. But for those years that there was no Star Wars, you would fill in the gap with your imagination as much as possible. And those action figures were great because you'd write your own stories. And that's why, so when the Star Wars holiday special came out, it was a big deal because, oh my God, we're getting some more Star Wars. You know, Luke, when Mark Hamill went on the Muppet Show, it was a big deal, you know. And
back then, that's what you would do for TV. If you had something that was successful, you try and milk and keep it in people's eyes, because was it Empire Strikes Back comes back in what in 80?
1980, yeah.
So you know that's 3 years.
Yeah. 2.5 years later. And then, you know, but we didn't know we were going to get another Star Wars movie. For me, like, I spent 2.5 years just thinking, that's it. It's done. They blew up the Death Star. Story's over. You know, like the idea that we're like, it's 2020 and I got the world's best Boba Fett TV show on television and can watch it. And I can watch all these movies as much as I want, you know, new characters that I like.
Well, I tell you one thing, I find it funny.
I was then. I'm still as fascinated with it as I was then. I still love that universe.
Well, I find it funny that the tuning fork rifle came out.
Yeah, isn't the Mandalorian carrying that thing on?
Yeah.
Yep. Very cool.
Yeah. So
I love it.
Anyway.
Well, that's amazing that you got to be a little part of that history. That's why I said I love your book. I hope everybody got a copy. I love this book because it's so full of, like I said, my childhood. And between that and rock and roll, I mean, I don't know how much more you could have influenced me, John.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's continue to influence other people, younger people, and you know, we just keep on going. I haven't finished. I'm drawing. I'm still doing it, and you're doing it also. So that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I just feel the same way. Like everybody's like, oh, I don't. If I get rich, are you going to retire? I'm like, I still want to get. If I get rich, it's because I want to do my own stuff. I want to be able to like. I started out wanting to be a fantasy painter like Frank Frazetta. So at some point, I'm going to get back to trying to do that.
Okay, well then, when you retire, you'll be able to do it because then you won't have to worry about anything else. You know,
nobody's going to buy them. So.
Hey, wait a minute! You never know. Kick Indiegogo. You know?
That's true. I don't know. I just like I want to get. My dream is to actually just get. What I'm trying to say is I want to get to a creative place where I'm not worried about the income. Right. That would be an ideal world for me, where I just create because it's like I did when I was a kid. I'm not worried about where my next meal is coming from. I'm just worried about making art because it's fun to make art. That would be nice. And I would actually say, if I had any advice, it's like try to keep any aspiring artists that are watching this and want to know, it's like if you keep that little candle alive in your heart that you're doing it because it's fun, everything will radiate out from that. Because if you're not enjoying yourself and you're not enjoying your work, that comes through in the work. But if you're doing something because it satisfies you, that's a life well spent. Even if you're not making money at it, even if it's not, you're going to meet a lot of disappointments. The road is a long, hard one, and there's always going to be somebody there to tell you you can't do it. And if you listen to them, then they're right. But if you do it because you love it and it makes you happy, and you're making art from a place that makes you happy, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah. Hey, that is a great place to stop. Let's end it right there. Darick, it was a pleasure talking to you. I thank you very much, guys. I don't know. We'll talk on the other side of this curtain. But anyway, we'll see. I don't know if I'll have one next week. As a coffee break. But if I do, I'll give you a Twitter shouts and such. So anyway, thanks a lot. Take care.
Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.